The No Nonsense Roundtable. It's a weekly show broadcast on Rochester, New York's 50,000-watt iHeart radio station, News Radio Wham 1180. The host, Dom Geneva, interviews guests from all walks of life, all with amazing stories to tell. What you are about to hear is a recording of a previous broadcast with limited commercials. Now, here's host, Dom Geneva.
Well, welcome everybody to another edition of the No Nonsense Roundtable. I'm Dom Geneva here, as I am every Saturday at 10 o'clock. And we're here today with a woman by the name of Sara Passamonte. Welcome to the show, Sara.
It is an honor to be here, Dom. Seriously. I'm very excited to be here.
Well, I appreciate that. We're talking to an awful lot of people. It's 10 or 12,000 people. And I think your message with your organization is something that people need to know about. Maybe they don't know about. And Sara is the president and executive director of Compeer here in Rochester. So let's give everybody the 30,000-foot view of what Compeer is, because I think a lot of people know the name, but they don't know exactly what you do. And then we're going to get a little bit into you and how you got to be in the position you're in.
You are so right about that. I think I've heard, over my last 19 years at the organization, I've heard of you guys. You do great work. I said, do you know what you do? We do? No, not so much. So they're like, do you work on computers? No, we don't. And not great with computers at all. But Compeer is a non-clinical mental health organization. So for the last 50 years in Rochester, we have connected individuals with community volunteers in these sort of intentional friendships, we like to call them, that blossom into very organic relationships. So thousands of people in Rochester and now beyond, because the organization is international, have been connected to friends and peer mentors and other types of support through the Compeer program.
So it's a volunteer program where you are pairing volunteers with one individual or groups of individuals?
One-on-one. So we serve children, we serve adults. The only thing we don't operate in a one-to-one capacity is our veteran program, which we'll talk more about later.
Well, let's talk a little bit about you first, because you are a Rochesterian, you told me, right?
I am. I grew up on the west side, spent most of my time in the Gates-Chila area. I did buy my first home in the city of Rochester in my early 20s, which was a nice little short ride to work. Compeer's in the old Sears building, which is Monroe Square on Monroe Avenue. And I lived there for about 8 years before heading back to Gates. So now I'm back in Gates with my daughter.
Okay, so here's the crazy question I'd love to ask people. When you were a young girl, what did you want to do?
Well, I wanted to be a singer or an astronaut. So nothing in between.
Well, you could be both. You could be like the Roy Rogers of space travel or something.
Well, so my parents were musicians, but they are musicians. They're not full-time musicians. So they had day jobs and they had bands. And I thought, when I was little, everyone had a day job and everyone was in a band.
Okay.
So, I really think going into kindergarten, I thought in my mind, what does your mom play? What does your dad play? So I think I did, in the back of my mind, think I was always going to do both, and maybe not singer astronaut. Well, I ended up being singer and nonprofit worker.
So, just as an aside, what kind of music did they play? My
parents had a very popular wedding band back in the 80s, Special Blend. My father still has the name of that band, so they've since split, but very amicably, and they both still play music separately. Sometimes together. You can catch them sometimes on the east side doing some duo gigs together, which is so cool. It's really cute. But they did, just think of your average wedding in 1985, and every song you could imagine. The ballads, the rock, people loved them, and they played for someone's wedding, and then they'd be playing for that person's sister's wedding and their brother's wedding, and we had babysitters every weekend. Truly, I just thought that was normal. Well,
Nate and I got married in 1986, and back then this thing, the turtle dance was popular, and my colleagues at Chrysler, a bunch of them decided that they were going to dance on their back on the floor, and I can relate to what you're talking about. So how did you get to be involved with Compeer?
So I did I was in college at Nazareth, now Nazareth University. Back then it was Nazareth College, and I was a psych major, and I thought I was going to go on to be a clinical psychologist. That's what I thought I was going to do at that point. So in my middle school, high school years, I started leaning towards this mental health field. But about 3-4 years into my bachelor's program, I wasn't sure. I was like, am I looking at grad schools? What am I going to do? Somebody connected me to the Compeer program as an intern, and I too had never heard of it. I hadn't even heard of it, no less knew what they did, but I ended up getting this summer internship that blossomed into my career. I was just fascinated with how the program didn't employ any clinicians, not even social workers by, maybe by trade, but, we weren't operating like with counselors in the program, but just connecting the average individual to help somebody. And I thought, man, I could really multiply myself. And maybe as a therapist, I would have a caseload of, 20, 30 people at max. But I was put in a position after my internship. I was brought on part-time. I ended up getting a coordinator position where I was able to recruit volunteers and make a bunch of matches, we call them, between volunteers and individuals. I was in the youth program at that point, so matching a lot of children with their mentors, and just thought, wow, because we ask for a year commitment from people, but most people, if they made it a year, they were making it 2 years. And if they were making it 2 years, they could make it 3. And before I knew it, I was connected with my own Compeer kids. 5 years went by, 10 years went by. I mean, now I'm at 19 years with the organization, and I'm still connected with those kids I met back in 2005. They're young adults.
Well, this compels the question: is everybody starting off as an intern, or do you have older people that are volunteering for? I mean, how?
We only have capacity for maybe 2-3 interns a semester that are kind of just stationed in the office, learning about the program, and some have been hired. Certainly, my path, like intern to CEO in 15 years, is not the norm. But most people come into the program 18 and up. We ask for our volunteers to be 18 and up, and they can get connected. They may have just heard about us through word of mouth, and they come meet with a volunteer coordinator. They get interviewed. We do some background checks, and we help them select a match. And we narrow down our waiting list of 150 people to 3 or 4 that we think that they would be a good fit with, and let them pick.
So let's talk about the volunteers and then the people that they are serving. This is fascinating to me because you say there's no physical requirement for somebody to have a degree in psychology or whatever to be a volunteer. So what is your typical volunteer like? I mean, what is there an average volunteer?
We get a decent amount of college students who may be exploring the field and want to get better connected, and also college students, because we're so lucky we have all these local colleges and universities. We have people that are actually stationary enough to commit to a 1-year relationship, and then we get retirees too, because they have a little bit more time typically. Don't get a ton in the 30 to 40 range, not to say that they're not needed. It's just some people are raising their own families or taking care of their parents, so we don't always have people with that extra time available.
And so how many volunteers do you have?
We have currently about 200 volunteers.
200 volunteers?
We really should have upwards of 350 volunteers. Just to give you a little bit of perspective, post-pandemic, we are very short. I mean, when I say there's 150 people on the waiting list, that's not an exaggeration. We get referrals for individuals all the time. So if we make a match, we're still getting 2 more referrals.
My Lord, that is an enormous organization. Now, how many staff people do you have?
We have about 22 staff, and that's a mix of people who are recruiting volunteers, doing client intakes, some supervisors, and then we have a lot of direct service staff. So aside from our volunteer program, which is really what Compeer is, we do some fee-for-service behavioral health services that use paid peers who are certified peers, people with lived experience. Again, not clinical, but are able to help using their own experience to help another individual.
Wow. I had absolutely no idea. And we're going to be talking more to Sara right after this.
This portion of the show is brought to you by Martinizing Dry Cleaners in Fairport. During COVID days, I discovered a dry cleaner that would pick up and deliver. I discovered Martinizing in Fairport. I later discovered that the owner, Todd, was an ex-corporate employee who went on to start his own business just like I did, and his customer service is beyond compare. Google rating, 4.9 with 143 reviews, 4.9. Call 425-4242 or martinizing.com/Fairport.
This is Dom for my friend Jim Shelley and his Fanatics Pub and Blue Stage in Lyman, New York. Like I say, a short scoot down 390 to exit 10, make a left at the light. A couple miles down the road, there's Fanatics Pub and Blue Stage. You can see their nightly shows by going to fanaticspub.com, but this time of the year, his patio is open for free entertainment 3 to 6 on weekends. Go! It's a great place. Well, welcome back. You're listening to No Nonsense Roundtable. We're here today with Sara Passamonte. What a pretty name.
Thank you.
I like that name. And she is the president, executive director of Compeer Rochester. And we were just talking that you have 200 volunteers, and you probably could use 100 more, you're saying?
At least 100 more. So I mentioned earlier we have waiting lists, and we never have to hunt for these referrals for participants. I think some agencies may struggle to get, people enrolled in their programs. We have no problem enrolling clients. Getting volunteers is very hard. Even prior to the pandemic, recruitment has been a challenge. We ask for 4 hours a month, which is not a lot of time, especially when you compare that to how much time you may spend doing other things, but it is a commitment, and we ask for a relationship commitment. It's a year. So, somebody who may have the time now, but isn't going to have it 6 months from now, that's not really helpful. We're creating these relationships. We want people to feel that they're safe in those relationships.
So we're clear to people that might not have heard the first segment of the show. So they're working they're serving what kind of people?
So we work with people who are experiencing mental health challenges, and most of them are already in treatment. So they're already working with a more clinical provider, and they're referred to Compeer as an add-on to their therapy or other treatments for mental health.
So you're getting quote unquote clients from referrals. Is that what it is?
Yep. So really since the beginning of Compeer, we started in the Rochester Psychiatric Center. It was a small program called Adopt a Patient. So back in 1973, there were so many people in the institution that didn't need to be, but that's all we knew what to do at that point. So Compeer was born really right around the time of deinstitutionalization. So people were coming out of the hospital, and not that they needed to be in a hospital, but also didn't really know how to function in a community. And they certainly didn't have friends and connections. So the program went from Adopt a Patient, that was hosted by another agency. Our founder, Bunny Skirble, got involved with that and then took the program and just grew it. She got money from the New York State Office of Mental Health to disseminate the model. So took it from Rochester to other parts of New York State. Then it went into Pennsylvania. Now we have locations as far as Australia. The most recent Compeer actually opened up in London in 2020.
Now, there was a market change in the way we treated people like this years ago. You said we used to institutionalize them, and it seemed like it was sort of like during the Reagan administration, like the early 80s, that this whole thing changed. And this then is some way of dealing with people that shouldn't be institutionalized, but then again can't get along just by they need some help.
Exactly.
Is that pretty much it?
Exactly. So the handful of volunteers that we had in the hospital setting, a lot of them stayed involved. Maybe with some of the same people they were linked up with in the hospital, but then new people started getting referred. So now you have people that are living maybe in a group home setting. That's nice if you have that little step down. Maybe they went back with family members, and their providers were connected with Compeer to see, I can provide this person with a Compeer friend who can guide them through this new part of their journey.
So tell me what this 4 hours is like. Is it 4 straight hours? Is it broken up? I mean, how?
We say break it up. I think an hour a week is great, especially for Rochester, because things are so close. You don't have to necessarily drive, an hour to do something, to do an activity. So I think our volunteers on average will probably do 4 to 8 hours a month. You can spend maybe an hour, 2 hours together a week. Some people do a couple hour visits every other week. And as a relationship grows and builds, and this is what I noticed in my experience at Compeer volunteering, is that as you get to know each other better, you can spend less time, planning and more time just doing what you know that you like to do. So my Compeer match, Carol, that I've been linked up with for like 15 years at this point, I learned quickly about her that she loves to play cards. She loves to go for walks. So we would just get together. It was so easy to do that once a week, and just do something simple. The kids that I was matched with that I'm still in contact with, they're now 25, 26. They used to like to go to the YMCA, and we used to go swimming. So it's really taking advantage of what's already in our community and just bringing that individual along, or them bringing you along, and it becomes a normal part of what you do.
So explain to me what the interaction is like. I mean, is there? You must have like a training manual for this, right?
Yes, we absolutely do training for our volunteers so that they can get some initial assistance with how to build a relationship, and setting boundaries is really important. We talk about, don't spend a bunch of money on your match. And so with that little bit of training we do in the beginning, it helps people set the right expectations for a Compeer match. However, when you're really in it, it can be a little awkward. It's just like when you meet anybody for the first time. It's if you think back to when you met your first friends in school, it's awkward. So even though we provide a facilitated experience and we're introducing people to each other as staff, and we get parents involved if it's, children in that program, what it becomes is much more natural. And after a few visits, might be like, it's like we've known each other for years. That's how it felt with in my experience. I felt like this is easy. I can't imagine cutting this relationship at a year just because that was the expectation. Some people, it's not that easy. Some people, it takes months to get, that deeper connection. It takes months to build rapport and trust and get to know that person. Everyone coming into the program having a mental health condition means that they may have some symptoms that come out. They wouldn't be referred to the program if they didn't need some help with social skills. But now, and again, I don't know if it's so much post-pandemic, but just this whole era, the line between having a mental health challenge and not having one is very blurry. So most of our history was like, here's the client, here's the volunteer. And even though volunteers get so much out of the experience, there was still that distinction. And now it's so much more peer-based and so much more relatability. And I think, if you didn't experience isolation during the pandemic, if you've never experienced loneliness, the Surgeon General puts out this warning that it's loneliness. Loneliness is the epidemic. Loneliness is the problem that was just exacerbated by the pandemic, right? But some of our Compeer participants felt this way their whole lives. Mm-hmm. It was nothing new to be isolated in your apartment. It was nothing new to not be able to see people in person.
So people suffering in silence is what you're really talking about.
Yes. Yep. And so having somebody that can bring you out of your shell, and sometimes it's getting volunteers out of their shells too, because I know when I was younger, it was fun for me too, mm-hmm. to go out.
Well, it's a relationship. I guess it's sort of, like a planned meeting, a planned relationship. It's amazing to me that somebody thought of this idea, and it really is it sounds like a safety net sort of thing. Now, how long did these relationships last for, generally speaking?
So our average length of match right now, I think, is about 2 years for a youth match.
Really?
And that's because kids are a little bit more, transient. They kind of move around, or sometimes they're matched with younger people who also end up not staying in Rochester or whatever. Our adult program, the average length of match is so skewed because we have people that have been matched for 35 years. No lie.
Wow.
No lie. I have people who have been matched for 30, 35 years, 20 years. So the average length of match for the adult program is something like 15 years because of that. But maybe more like, 10 years is normal. It's normal.
Wow.
And I give that credit to our founder. I really do. She was in a car accident and she experienced this need for friendship.
And we'll talk about her right after this news break.
Here's a message from my friends at the Rochester Red Wings, the best sports team on the planet. Could be the universe.
The Red Wings are home this weekend to rock the Lilac. Friday is the first fireworks night of the year. Saturday has a magnetic schedule giveaway. Sunday, all tickets are $5, and kids can run the bases with Spikes and Mitzi. For tickets, visit RedWingsBaseball.com.
Well, welcome back. We're talking to Sara Passamonte, who is the president and executive director of Compeer Rochester. And we start to touch base on the founder of Compeer. Let's talk a little bit about her.
Yeah, so Bunny Skirble, she was connected with that Adopt a Patient program that was operating out of the psychiatric center back in the 70s. She also experienced a very serious car accident. So she was in the hospital for a long time. I don't remember if I think it was months actually. And she was just taken aback by how many friends came out to support her and her family. She had small children. So her friends were, sending meals over. People were coming to visit her in the hospital. And she thought, how could I have recovered without this safety net, without this support system? And was able to connect that to the experiences of the people who were living in the psychiatric hospital at the time and said, well, where are these people's support systems? Where are their friends? How are they going to get better? And so she took this model of, friends helping friends. She named it Compeer. So Adopt a Patient had that, sort of stigma, institutional feel, right? Or hospital feel. She named it Compeer, which is an actual word in the dictionary. Companion and peer, an equal, a friend. And I think she had some naysayers. I've heard this story where people said, no one is going to know what Compeer means, which is somewhat true, but we're really just trying to make that name known and what it means. And it means as much now as it ever did. But this endorsement, I like to say, from the Surgeon General about loneliness, it's real. It's a real thing, whether you have a diagnosed mental health challenge. They say 1 in 4, 1 in 5, grossly underestimated for people who are experiencing a mental health challenge. Maybe to have a serious diagnosis or a lifelong mental health issue, but these things come and go, and their recovery is up and down. It's not like you just get this diagnosis when you're a kid and then you get better and better and better. You go through life, and whether you have that label or not, and especially now, people need human connection. We need it.
Well, do you think the advent of this incredible social networking thing has hurt people's relationships?
So I have mixed feelings. I know people who had very little social connection because they were isolated. Social media gives you a chance to be in your own home without being fully isolated. Generationally, I see this. I have younger brothers. They were able to form really deep bonds with people actually without leaving their homes. So I think that for people who have the capacity to go out and be in person, I think that can be wonderful. I think social media can be that connector that may get people at least experiencing relationships and friendships who may not have been able to do that before. So it's a mixed bag. It's the comparison. That's what really gets us down in the dumps in our mental health. And I can speak, for myself, certainly when you see what people post and they're posting them in their best light and the perfect pose, and how many posts did it take, or how many pictures did it take to get you to look like you're so happy? And we have a lot more information now that lets us know that we need to limit our exposure to social media. And if we're going to use it, let's use it for good. Let's use it for enhancement. Let's use it for building each other up instead of tearing each other down.
Has the economy affected this population of people?
I don't know if there's been so much of a change, and that's just goes back to people with diagnosed mental illness may have already been experiencing and likely were experiencing this isolation well before the pandemic. So a lot of them maybe don't have full-time jobs or don't have what feel like meaningful careers that are going to allow them to make lots and lots of money. We also know that mental illness stretches across socioeconomic backgrounds. So just because you have a mental illness doesn't mean that you're not able to make money, and just because you have a lot of money doesn't mean that you don't have a mental illness.
Well, and there's one thing I can say. In my day, as old as I am, there was a real stigma attached to having a problem, admitting you had a problem, right?
Sure. And that I see breaking down, and so much in the last 5-10 years, generationally, the Generation Z, the hopefully the ones coming up behind them, that's my daughter, that's Alpha generation. I think that they are able to speak so eloquently about mental health. They're able to speak it loud and proud to say, this is happening. I'm experiencing sadness. I'm experiencing depression. I am anxious. And just being able to talk about it breaks down that stigma. And we've been trying to do that for years. People that would come out and volunteer prior to it being okay to talk about mental health, those were the people that were sort of leading the charge, and then introducing their own friends to their Compeer friend, which became a really beautiful way to broaden someone's network.
Well, if I was to paraphrase this, it sounds like this is something that would be valuable for people, both for the volunteer, because they're making a connection with somebody, and the person who is your, what do you call them, your client?
We say Compeer participants. And the beautiful thing about the word Compeer is that you could use it to describe either person in the relationship. That's my Compeer.
Well, and there's something, this is kind of like a win-win. There's something for each of them. So thinking about this, I guess everybody needs somebody to talk to. And being able to talk to somebody who you're not related to, or is charging you $200 an hour, is probably
ding ding ding.
Yeah, is probably worth it. I mean, there's a lot of people that need some sort of connection or human interaction, but maybe their thoughts they don't want to share with somebody that they love because their thoughts are very private and they don't want to admit, these things are part of their concerns, or like I said, they can't afford $200 an hour to go to a therapist.
Yeah, and even with children, there's so much research out there that says that kids who are exposed to trauma, which in our geographic region, city of Rochester, Monroe County, so many children are dealing with violence, poverty. Research shows that it takes one caring, positive adult role model to combat all of those negative effects of trauma, and a non-parent, if possible. If that's that teacher that spends a little bit of extra time, sometimes it is a school counselor, but their capacity is so limited. There's a classroom of 25 kids. So this one-to-one experience where you have somebody's undivided attention for an hour, it doesn't sound like a lot, but it can be all the difference in the world to somebody, to have somebody to be able to talk to, listen to, learn about other experiences, see another way of life, see another place besides your own backyard or your own street.
Well, especially these days when there's so many families where there isn't somebody to mentor the child too, right?
Yep, absolutely. And so many of our kids, I remember when I was working in the youth program, I noticed so many of our young boys were being raised by their mothers, their grandmothers, their aunts, their sisters. I'm like, where are the positive adult male role models for these children? And they are hard to come by. We have a huge dearth of male volunteers.
And that's really important these days, because you need, you need the role model. You need somebody to teach you right from wrong. It's not intuitive, and the ability to spend time with somebody is just so important. Now, speaking of spending time, I mean, are your volunteers like on call 24/7, or
no? This is very much a planned, planned outings. Get into a nice little routine if you can, a weekly, like pick a day a week that's always going to be the same whenever possible. But if something comes up, we have look at summer season in Rochester, right? Festival season. There's so much more to do that, so people are a little bit less prescribed, I would say. During the winter, sometimes we're just going to get together. My match, Carol and I, was like every Saturday, this is before I had my daughter and before the pandemic, every Saturday we'd pretty much play board games at her apartment. And you'd asked about that earlier. Can you go to each other's houses? Yes, you can. It's not the same, it's not the same regulations that you may have in other types of clinical relationships, but there's boundary setting that does need to happen. And that's why we spend time with our volunteers before they pick their match, before they get involved with somebody, to help them set them up for the best relationship possible that will be long lasting.
Well, we're heading into our last break, and there's a question I want to ask you about, who pays for all this? And we're going to get into that right after this. This is Dom for my friend John McClurg at McClurg Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram and McClurg Chevrolet in Perry, New York. Hey, the buds are coming out on the trees. Everybody likes a nice ride. Take a ride down to McClurg in Perry and see the great deals that he has on Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram vehicles and Chevy trucks. I tell you, John McClurg does business the old-fashioned way. He takes care of you. No nonsense. And used cars, he's got great used cars. See him today or go to McClurg Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram or McClurg Chevrolet.
This is Don for my friends at Jack Greco Furniture. You drive your car, you live with your furniture. That's why Nina and I buy our furniture locally from Jack Greco. Hey, lots of old name manufacturers of furniture switch to mass production, producing their furniture, well, who knows where. Why settle for that? Jack has quality pieces made by true craftsmen, and if you need a custom piece, Jack can happily do that. End of season's upon us. Jack has quality outdoor furniture you won't find anywhere else. Go to jackgreco.com for more info.
Well, welcome back. We're talking to Sara Passamonte, who is the president and executive director of Compeer Rochester. And we're talking about your volunteers and how they connect with other people. And it's rewarding for the volunteer and for the person who they are talking to. And the question that I have is that, is there a general age distribution of your I call them clients.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah. Clients is fine. We serve 5 and up. So we don't do early childhood, but ages 5 and up. There's really not, I wouldn't say an average age. Our children are like 5 to 18. We have a little bit of a transition age population, 18 to 21. And then we do have a good portion of older adults. I think just because, again, people that are in their 30s, 40s, they may be raising their own families, maybe taking care of their parents. Sometimes we don't have time. I'm just going to say this for myself. We don't have time to focus on ourselves. Oh, okay. But yeah, so there's a little bit of a skew towards the older, maybe like, 60 and up. And then we have the children like 5 to 15 is a pretty popular age to refer.
Well, when you're talking to a child who's in middle school, let's say, a very small change can make a heck of a lot of difference later on in life. So somebody for them to depend on and listen to, and you said something before that I think is particularly true. Somebody who may not be a parent.
Yeah.
My dad could never teach me how to play golf because he was my dad.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? You need somebody else sometimes with an outside view to help you or validate the parent, which has got to be important too. And it's got to be a challenge for the parent too when you have a child in need like that. Yeah.
So I think we've been really lucky that parents and caretakers have put their trust in a program like Compeer. I mean, we're putting their kids in cars with strangers in the beginning. I mean, truly, that's what's happening. So, and I will go back to, yes, we do lots of background checks and things like that. Although I will say Compeer volunteers that come in with a little bit of a history, a little bit of lived experience can be the most relatable, especially to our young adults, our teens. I mean, they would love to talk with somebody who can to share some stories about what they did in their childhoods.
So how do you? I mean, this little guy get paid for somehow, and where does your funding come from?
So we get a lot of funding from the Office of Mental Health. That's come from New York State Office of Mental Health through the Monroe County Office of Mental Health, which then gets doled out to Compeer for our volunteer-based programs. We also do business with the Monroe County Veterans Service Agency. They have selected Compeer as the vendor for Private Dwyer, which is a peer-to-peer program specifically for veterans. And that's all group activities. Veterans of all branches, discharge statuses, eras come to Compeer and they gather. We have a golf league over the summer. We have sailing. We have bowling in the winter. We have painting parties. Any chance to get veterans all together. One-on-one doesn't work as well as a intentional setup, but groups, our veterans do really, really well. We do have a Vets Driving Vets program as well, which is veterans providing both medical and non-medical transportation. So we get some funding for veterans. We get some funding for people with mental health challenges. And then we fundraise. We get really small to mid-sized donations from individual givings. It's not a huge part of what we do. And we have a walk coming up in November. So for the past 5 years, we've done a walk as our new fundraiser post-pandemic to get people out moving. After walk season has ended for most organizations, we hit the pavement and say, hey, it's Rochester. We're all going to get kind of sad because the sunlight's going away and we're not active. We're going to sit on our butts and scroll through social media. So we made it a point these last few years to really rally around this walk, dress for it, get out in the cold. We've had great weather actually the last few years, but that's our new fundraiser that effectively replaced some of the old like galas that we used to do. We had a sports lunch and a golf tournament, and we try to get people up and moving. So we do a lot of grant writing and things like that, and it puts together our I say it's a medium-sized budget. We're a small organization. We're about $1.5 million to run it, and I always say if I could get $2 million, I could do 1 million times more the work.
Well, there are two things that you need. You need money and you need volunteers.
Yes.
So let's do a little retail here. Tell me about your webpage.
Yep. So CompeerRochester.org will take you to our website where you'll learn all that you ever wanted to know about our programs, the youth program, the veterans program, the adult program, our fee-for-service programs that you can get referred into to work with a peer specialist for people that have a little bit higher need than what a volunteer can provide. And you can literally walk in the door. So we are co-located with Trillium and East House in the Monroe Square building. It's the old Sears building, if anybody remembers that. They just ripped out the original escalators last year. So you can walk in. We're there Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and come and just have a conversation with somebody. We love walk-in volunteers. You can give us a call. We have usually a live person that answers the phones, at least in the mornings. And then the website, there's a brief volunteer inquiry form if you just want to learn a little bit more. There's videos. There's our donation page. So if you're feeling generous and you want to throw, some dollars at the cause, that helps us out too. Certainly would love to have anyone's time, talent, treasure as part of the Compeer mission.
So if somebody contacted you and they said they were interested in the program, you probably have a one-on-one where a volunteer now would talk to them, right?
Absolutely. Yep. And we have a dedicated volunteer coordinators who will get people through the whole process. We do some group offerings like for trainings and things like that, but for the most part, we work around your schedule. So if you say, hey, I would really like to work with a child in your program, we connect you with Gabe, our volunteer coordinator. He brings you through the process. We have somebody looking for matches, and then we put it together. I use that term intentional friendship. It sounds weird, but that's kind of what it is. And then people just get to know each other. And it's beautiful.
I would think that would be particularly useful when you're talking about a vet to a vet, I would imagine, right?
Yes. And what we hear from veterans is that it is that camaraderie that they've been missing. So whether it's somebody who's been back for decades or somebody that just got out, hopefully they're coming back to at least some family members, but it's just not the same as people who know what you've been through. And that's what we hear from veterans is that, hey, I don't have to spend the time trying to explain myself. These people get it.
Yeah.
And they're having fun. So it's not forced. It's just, we're here, we're golfing, we're painting.
Yeah, well, as much as somebody can talk about what they've been through, there's got to be nothing like relating to somebody who has actually been through the same stuff that they have. This is the way I handle this, and this is the way that you're going through, and whatever. That's very valuable. So let's go over that webpage one more time.
Yes, so CompeerRochester.org. Walk into Monroe Square at 259 Monroe Avenue. Give us a call. We're at 585-546-8280.
And we only have another minute or two left in the show. What haven't we not touched on that you'd like to do in the last couple of seconds here?
I'd love to just impress upon people that you don't have to be an expert in anything to get involved with Compeer. And if you have the will to be a friend, if you think you got those couple hours a month to give back to somebody, it's so rewarding, and there's health benefits to volunteers too. We're finding out that volunteers actually, there's some research that says that if you volunteer, especially in a relational capacity, that you live longer and you live healthier, reduced heart disease, improved mental wellness for yourself. So there's tangible benefits. There's the feel good stuff, and just come on this journey with us to end loneliness.
Well, Don Eilhart was on my show once, and we asked him what his philosophy of life was, and he said there was one word, and it was others. What you can do for others. So I think that's probably what you're talking about here, doing something for others, and it's helping others, and it's helping the person that's doing it too. So
yes.
I encourage everybody, give me that website one more time.
CompeerRochester.org.
CompeerRochester.org. Sara, thank you ever so much for coming in today. I learned an awful lot, and I'm sure that all our listeners did too. So until next week, it's the No Nonsense Roundtable right here, 10 o'clock on Saturdays.
Thanks for listening. Tune in every Saturday from 10 to 11 on News Radio Wham 1180. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll make more.